Hello, hello.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Glenn. Welcome everyone that is trickling in to the webinar today. Give everyone just a few minutes to get situated. While we're waiting on everyone, why don't we go and throw in the chat? I know it's been the topic of our office this week, given that our HQ is in France, but Spain or Argentina, who's everybody got this weekend? Throw it in the chat. I'm going Spain myself. I think they're going to be able to bring it home.
I'm watching more World Cup this time around than I have before. I guess because it was hosted here, more interested. And
Yeah.
the American team was interesting this time around too. So
Yeah,
and Cape Verde.
I know they held both Spain and Argentina really well. I've felt bad for all of our European colleagues that have had to stay up really late and watch all the games at 2, 3 a.m. It's been crazy.
Some messy
Awesome.
fans
More
in
people
here.
trickling in. Yeah, definitely. I know the WeWork yesterday was going pretty crazy when Argentina brought it out. A lot of Messi fans here. All right, we'll wait maybe one more minute. Also, throw in the chat where folks are calling in from. I'd love to see, do we have any international folks? Are we all here in the States? Go ahead and throw that in the chat too. Would love to see where folks are. Right on, already coast to coast, Atlanta and LA. Nice, we are international. Yeah. And got a few calling in from Europe as well. Right on. Well, let's go ahead and jump in now that everyone is situated. I'm sure more people will fly in the chat as we continue. But thanks everyone for attending today's webinar, Agentic AI in Finance, where to automate, where to stay in the loop. Really excited to chat about what we're doing here at Agicap to help with this, but also, and more importantly, excited to get Glenn's insights from the work that he does with his clients. So Glenn, do you mind just kind of giving everyone an intro as kind of some context into what you do at RoboCFO, maybe just a quick spiel on your personal background of being a multi-time CFO at other companies as well?
Yeah, sure. So started RoboCFO. Actually, we picked up the RoboCFO name about 2 or 3 years ago. Before that, it was a consulting firm. But I was a CFO for about 15 years. Private equity-backed companies, some turnaround situations, and always, though, very analytical. Being CFO of a private equity-backed company, they always wanted a lot more reporting, maybe than other small and mid-cap companies would have. So I kind of leaned into statistics and analytics and reporting pretty early in my career. And as machine learning became more prominent in everything in analytics, I leaned into that and wrote a book during COVID about machine learning in finance. Back then, not many people were thinking or talking about machine learning in finance, but then generative AI happened, and now everybody's talking about AI. So I've shifted my focus in the consulting world from data and analytics to doing full AI implementations, and a lot of training around that too right now with new technology, and a bunch of webinars as well. So excited to be here today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Glenn. So certainly a lot of education that is needed given the last 12 months, 18 months that we've had, especially in the world of finance. A lot is changing really quickly in terms of capabilities and what someone can connect even their basic tools into. So excited to get some more of your context and experience as we talk today. From a personal note, just a personal intro. I'm Brandon with the Agicap team based here in Austin, Texas. To have two slides just to give folks that maybe aren't familiar with Agicap a quick overview just of the business, and then we'll flip over. I've got some questions for Glenn to learn a little bit about what he's been working on with some of his clients and what he's seeing in the market, where to automate, how to make sure you're keeping up to speed. So very quick background on Agicap. We've been around for 10 years. We started in France, offices all over Europe, Spain, Italy, Germany, also over 8,000 customers around the world, both in the US, Europe, and across the world, as you can see in this this graphic, but over 600 employees. I'm here in Austin, like I mentioned, with the rest of the US go-to-market and implementation team, so supporting our customers here in the States. So excited to continue growing what we're doing with cash management, cash forecasting. As you look on G2 or any other review sites out there, we are the clear leader in the space when it comes to mid-market SMB organizations looking to implement better cash management, cash forecasting principles that are out of Excel, have a little more automation into them. So we'll touch on more of that as we continue in the call, and have a few examples that I'll show at the end on what we're doing with AI. But in the meantime, want to make sure we get Glenn's context. That's why we brought him on today, with what you're seeing in the market. And I feel like every week I see a new post on X or a new newsletter that I get that highlights some new innovation of what can now be automated with AI. So given that you are in front of your clients that are CFOs and controllers every week, everyone is hearing some version of like, hey, we automated our entire process, the entire finance team, it's all AI agents. What of that is actually real? What of that is noise? Like, how much validity is in that statement as it stands today?
Yeah, we're getting there. And I kind of feel like, we hear all this news about, oh, we're a AI-led finance department, and, we're laying off employees, or whatever the sort of marketing blurb around it is. And I think really right now, it's kind of like we were talking about agents for a couple of years before agentic AI was a thing. And I think right now, most of the, we fired everyone talk is marketing. And the real story, and I don't want to be like overly optimistic here, but historically, as new technology has come along, it has created different kinds of jobs, and there's been shifts in the workplace. But I think with AI right now, there's not really anything that I would say, oh, let me just completely turn this over to AI. So what we need to think about with AI at this point is it's augmentation, not replacement. But this year is a little different, because in the early days, generative AI, you would upload your files, you could have it analyze, summarize, make recommendations, and then the human acted on that. And it was really, I don't want to belittle it, but it was really like a pretty cool way to do Google search. And I know that's maybe a bit of an understatement, but the human had to drive everything. Now with agents, AI can take action. And we're seeing in 2026, really just in the last 6 months, all this talk about agentic AI, we're starting to see that come to fruition. We were talking about agents forever. Last time I checked, they were at the peak of the Gartner hype cycle. And really now the technology is there and getting better. But what's interesting today is the usage is still low in actual workflows, because if you're not a developer, if you don't have that background, going out and building an agent, I know there's kind of the drag and drop, and you can just tell Claude Code to do it. But we're in this kind of scary era of we don't know what we don't know. So the agents are strong assistants. Who's building them? How are they being deployed? I think you do have some forward finance groups, but again, finance and accounting, we don't want to be on the bleeding edge of technology out there, just building our own sort of unchecked apps for all the security concerns and everything that's going on. So I think it's few and far between right now that someone could say they have a full self-driving finance department. But at this point, though, the question isn't will AI do finance? We've all seen what we get, even with just a chatbot. I'm not even getting into the agents, not the glorified Googling that I mentioned before. It's really more than that. And I say that in jest a bit, but now it is, okay, we're seeing results with this, but how much do I let AI run on its own?
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you have a personal example that you could highlight, Glenn, of like how you mentioned that we've been talking about agents for a couple of years now, but there's been a lot of growth just in the last 6 months, the last year, of what can be done now. My favorite example that's not finance related would be that video of Will Smith eating pasta. I don't know if you've seen that from like
Oh, yeah.
where we can see the growth of AI every single year, and how I remember when that first video came out and it looked horrible, and now it's so incredibly clear. So using that as an analogy, I guess what started out when you were first diving into this a few years ago as pretty rough and not actually spitting out great results, to where you've been amazed that, oh, this is actually, giving me and my clients real results now? Like any specific part of leveraging AI in finance?
Yeah, and I'm really thinking about workflows here. I mean, the analysis has gotten better, and the things you can do with vibe coding are incredible. But I think about tools like Zapier, Make, N8N. I was a huge N8N person, but I haven't built a workflow in N8N in months, because now you can, with an agent harness, you can customize it more. But I think what we're seeing is, so, Make and Zapier and all these have been around for years, just as a way to connect different systems and have a workflow where you extract something through an API and bring it from one system into another, or you're transforming the data or whatever. But now with agents, and I don't want to get too deep into the construct here, but with an agent harness, you can have AI go follow several steps, and you can have several steps in a workflow be deterministic. So it's not, this is AI, doing the probabilistic outcome. This is AI is going to use code and do some transformation if it's pulling data from one system and putting it into another. Then you use AI where it makes sense, if there's a recommendation or something to do there. So I think the difference is the way we think about these workflows. For me, it used to be rigid, hard-coded first with, think about these tools that I mentioned as, they're basically like Visio, except each module in it actually performs a task. And now if you have the harness, you can tell it to do that. You can tell it to transform data, to pull data from one system, move it to another. And it's, so right now, harnesses, and we're going to talk about, obviously, about cash flow forecasting, but I've got a great agent harness that does that, and it even runs like Monte Carlo simulations on the cash flow outcomes. And so the ability to not be limited to a specific tool. You've still got to use the SDKs from each of the developers, but the ability to actually have an agent run something, and it's got these guardrails around it, and it actually is, you can get to market quicker, get to production quicker with these agents than you could building out these sort of complex decision tree workflows that you would do in these low-code, no-code tools.
Mm-hmm. And to call out the elephant in the room, if this is a new topic to people, which, depending on the company, I know this is what I see with customers that we talk to. I'm sure it's similar for folks that come to you. Some folks are just really getting into this and figuring out how they can use it. Others have already been experimenting and have been using Zapier and N8N for a while. So obviously different levels of experience, but what I've seen is that some of the folks that are trying to learn more about how to use AI in their workflows and really giving it access to everything in their environment, they get hung up on that security aspect of permissions and, worried about prompt injections and what do I give it access to write versus just read. What do you tell your clients that come to you when that's one of their primary concerns?
Yeah, and that is a very important question, because I mentioned vibe coding, and with vibe coding, if you can imagine an app, AI will build it for you. But if you don't know about things like role-based access and OAuth and encryption at rest, encryption in transit, and not to store your your API keys in the open, the danger of building it yourself is we have this incredible power right now, but we don't. It's like giving someone a Ferrari for their first driving lesson. There's potential to do something really wrong out there, and I think I don't know where this ends up, and people are trying to solve for this now. But there's two fears kind of going on at this moment. One, is it safe? What's going to happen with my data? I don't. We can't leak company information. We can't leak personal information out there. How am I going to approach that? And the second is, where do I even start? And I think that safety worry is rational and not paranoid. And it's funny, because I do all this training, and I teach people how to vibe code, and I feel like I'm giving them enough information to be dangerous. I was actually looking at my errors and omissions and my cyber policy and talking about, if I'm giving people this great power, what happens when they go build something and they mess it up, or they leak data. But I think one, outside of the security side of it, another issue is people feel like, well, my data is kind of a mess. We have to wait for perfect data. And I think if you're waiting for that perfect data, you're never going to get it. We've been talking about digital transformation for 30 years, and I don't know what it means at this point. But if you're waiting for that perfect data, you're never going to get it. So you're never going to begin. So I think, and I guess maybe going back to your initial question, this is about what you can build and what data can leak out. I think pick a workflow where the mistake is cheap and reversible. And that's starting out in this. You're going to build trust incrementally with the AI when you figure out how and when it works, and when you figure out rules around the data and security. But start there, at something that is low consequence, but maybe it's a repeated task that you do every day that is an internal thing. Build a workflow around that, test it out, and then kind of move up the grid to the more complex issues. But you're not going to earn trust with AI by your company's AI usage policy or something from a memo. You're gonna earn it watching AI get small things right over and over, and just using it over and over. And in those use cases where a wrong answer really doesn't cost much. So I think right now, security and risk are they kind of outrank where regulation and technical limits are. And that's really, you hit on what's the top barrier to scaling. And McKinsey, in their AI trust maturity survey that came out a couple of months ago, said the same thing. And that's the calibration that we all need to figure out right now. Yes, we can do amazing things. How much do we do ourselves, and how much do we look to the SaaS companies and providers to do this for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just a reminder for everyone that's listening in, if you have questions that you want to throw to Glenn, kind of get his experience from working with his clients at RoboCFO, or even just from his experience as a CFO of some PE-backed orgs, throw it in the Q&A, and we'll get to those questions later on in the session. So please throw those in now if you have them. Don't forget it. One thing that I want to go back to, because I used to work more on the IT side, Glenn, so I've seen folks kind of get confused about the differences between the different types of AI, and what's kind of like the new generative versus more of just learning and analyzing based on past results and past data. Can you walk everyone through that from a finance lens on the two main types of AI and why they should make sure they know the difference?
Yeah, and that's important, and I think it's worth digging into a little bit. And it's funny that you mentioned that, and that you came from IT as well, because when I wrote my first book on AI and finance, generative AI was not a usable thing. I mean, I think that paper from Google, the attention is all you need, that sort of started the movement towards generative AI. That came out in like 2017, but we didn't have the compute or the ability to do anything with it at that point. It was just a research paper. So when I wrote my first book, it was about using machine learning in finance. And that's very different than generative AI, because machine learning is taking data and you've got your algorithms and you're training the algorithms on the data that you have. And if you run the same inputs through a deterministic model, a machine learning that does clustering, regression, classification, the sort of historical things that AI did, you would get the same answer every time. And that is much closer to what finance needs from AI. Finance kind of runs on that deterministic logic. So, the close has to tie out, the auditor has to be able to trace it. And then generative AI comes along and it's the opposite of that. It's probabilistic. It predicts, without getting into how generative AI works, but everybody knows now, it's a prediction machine. It's like the autocomplete in your email or in your text. It's just predicting the most likely next word. So if you ask probabilistic AI the same question twice in a row, you might get two different answers, and that doesn't on its own mesh with finance. So you have to have those guardrails around it. But the crazy thing with generative AI as well is it will very confidently give you that wrong number. And then if you call it out on it, we've all been there where you call out the AI and it's like, oh, you're right. Yeah, I don't know why I said that. And the hallucination that comes with it. But I think most finance teams that are already using AI, they've all experienced that same problem. But they've also seen AI can do some pretty amazing analysis on, you can dump in, your trial balance and have it go through and find correlations and find variances and things that much quicker than a human could. And you can actually get real value from that. So the takeaway out of that deterministic versus probabilistic is match the tool to the task. There's a time and place for each. So probabilistic AI you could use for drafting, summarizing, surfacing details out of the data. And then the deterministic automation, that anything that has to tie out, anything that requires math, because while generative AI might hallucinate a number, if you're using Python or code or whatever, it's gonna create the same number every time. So I guess the third part of that triumvirate is the human has to be in the middle, where the two meet. So for what works over and over, it's not going to be the flashy agent that you built on some new startup app that came out there. It's going to be the kind that has predictable, understandable, auditable results that come out, and it's dependable because it's deterministic, not because it's clever or it's the latest new build your own agent tool that came out or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like I have whiplash multiple times a week, even as fast as this is advancing, because it's like, oh, the new Claude model is now the best. Oh, Gemini just released Flash and it's really good. Oh, Soul with OpenAI is now really good. Like, if it's not just about flipping between model to model, because like you said, like it's still going to hallucinate stuff sometimes, and it's going to say, "You're absolutely right, Glenn. Let me readjust that. Sorry, I gave you the wrong answer." Like, what is more of the point? I guess just making sure we are analyzing all of the data. Like, can you kind of go into that more instead of just looking for the right answers with some magic wand?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, if you think about it, where to put the model is to make it that analyst. The models and their improvements are great, and I know people, and I think we all probably bounce between different models, and I'm not here to promote one over the other, but we probably bounce between different models for different reasons. Like I've noticed lately, like Claude, if you're doing any kind of reporting or whatever, and I don't know, what the training is, but if you're using like Opus 4.8, it's gotten kind of weirdly condescending the way it writes, like not to me, but in the report that it's doing. And I think that's not going to fly. Gemini seems to be the most human writer right now, which I think is kind of interesting. And then, with ChatGPT, I know right this year, it seems like Claude's going more to the professional side. ChatGPT up until 5.6. I know there's ChatGPT for work now, and they're in there. But if you think about switching out these models, as the models get smarter, I think that's going to be less and less important, because what really the agent harness and the agent work this year is really, to me, where it's going. And I think that to think about a harness, without getting into all the technical details of it, think about if you're an analyst, you have a human analyst, you have an operating environment. You've got your task queue, your policy manual, you get approved access to whatever systems you're using, you get your working papers, you have escalation rules, you have your evidence and audit trail. And that's really the same way to think about with what we can do with an agent harness. So we give an agent, so in what I've got up on the screen, just picture that model in the middle. You give it tool access, you give it verification loops where it says, I'm going to go work this, get this number, I'm going to loop back, check the number, and then there's an approval gate in the internal model approval, and then the human in the loop approval, and then the state it's able to hold, which if you think about one of the big problems with AI early on is every time you go to with generative AI, every time you go to a new chat, it doesn't have any context. And it's like that movie Memento, where it's just, you're repeating and you have to reset every time. But with where AI has gotten and the ability to, whether it's RAG or whatever you're doing for context, it can hold its state across multiple conversations, whether it's a project or skills or the data you connect to it. And with the harness, you can actually have it now leave an audit trail. So it's not as much a black box anymore as, I don't know, I asked the magic AI, and it's the same thing as shaking up a magic 8-ball and getting an answer, and you don't know, what's going to come up or why. Now, though, it's getting more useful, and it really is getting more relevant to finance, because we can put all these things in place, from giving it the tools all the way through that audit trail. And I think right now, that harnesses the scaffolding around the model. And the real question for finance isn't, how smart is the AI? It's what do we build around it to keep it honest? So all the models now, whichever one you're using, they're going to be pretty good at really all the tasks we're doing in finance. But the question is, how are we going to structure around it? And it's, if you're in an SMB or whatever, or you're doing it for personal use, who cares really? But when you're reporting and you have to have an auditable business, and you're running on, it has to run on real numbers. We're actually at a place where I know we talked about data privacy and all the concerns around that, but we're starting to see real value with AI, with generative AI, that we can actually get it to have the same answer, get it to repeat, and understand its whole thought process through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, getting more specific on the finance workflows part of this and what you're seeing with your clients. Obviously, my background at Agicap is centered around conversations on cash and treasury workflows. So I'm curious how you've decided with some of the clients you've worked with, how do you determine what AI can do on its own versus what it should just go collect and then the human can handle? Where do you draw the line there?
Yeah, and that's the right framing. It's to me, it's collect versus decide. I'm not tossing the keys to my agent and letting it run the show. I might let it get all the way up to that wall where it's making a recommendation, but I'm not letting it move forward on its own. So I think collecting and consolidating data. I'm sort of mixing the chocolate and peanut butter here, because the deterministic part where we have an agent in place where it's pulling data out, that's the AI is going to do that, but it is putting it into a data frame or whatever, your database, if you have that set up or whatever, but it's going and collecting the data, consolidating it. It can do its analysis. You can, instead of, to keep it super simple, you get your monthly management report from the team, and you're going through and you're doing your first scan on how do we perform to budget, how do we do to prior period, prior year, all the stuff you do. With AI, you can have it do that first pass, and instead of you going through and reading it all, it'll give you a summary of it. So you kind of start at a higher level and can spend your time, instead of just summarizing the data, going through and doing that deeper analysis. So that's a great use of AI. using data that AI collects to move money, I'm not ready to make that an autonomous decision from the AI. I think that's where you have a human, a hand on the wheel. But it can also give you that same level of reporting, give you the insight. There's other things, like FX and intercompany and treasury. Those are probably in the middle where the model kind of surfaces and stages the information, but a person's still deciding. And I think as you look at that sort of collect and decide, what you think about in your workflows is, okay, what happens if the model's wrong? What are the consequences here? If it gives me a weird number or whatever, and it's just internal or it's just for me, the stakes are pretty low on that, especially with my domain expertise and whatever business I'm in, and my role expertise and whatever role I'm in. That's sort of low stakes. And the person who's looking at that can go verify it really quick. But if you're doing something where the AI is pushing information out externally or is making decisions around cash and actually executing those, that's gives me pause. And I guess I'm being a little bit provocative here because every time they train a new version or whatever, they do get smarter. But at this point, the models are smart enough, and I'm not the only one saying this, but think about if these models didn't get any smarter than they are today, we're fine for years, because if you look at these iterations that are happening now, they're not necessarily smarter models. It's sort of features being tacked onto it where the models can do new and interesting and different things, and they can run for longer time horizons, the agentic work and everything. So at this point, it feels like it doesn't matter to me how smart the model is. It's really just about the harness, the guardrails, and how we're using it, and it's the practical application of it. And I think going back to my questions that I said before, everything sort of ties to, we have this massively powerful new technology, and we're still fumbling around and trying to figure out how to use it. And I don't even mean end users are doing that. I think the frontier labs themselves are still figuring out new ways to apply it and get benefit out of it. So I think that's really it. It's just about, we all have to become process thinkers and think about, if I have a brand new green intern that is their third year in college, I'm going to let them do a bunch of stuff, but I'm not going to let them start cutting checks from the company. So I think if you just kind of score the consequences of a wrong decision against how fast it can do things, and I think that for all of us, the boundary is kind of going to draw itself.
Mm-hmm. And for someone that's thinking about what they can build into their day-to-day that'll maybe lighten the load and take something out of their workflow that's manual today, why should they try to figure out how to vibe code it, like you were saying, with Claude or another model out there? And why shouldn't they? Like, why should they pursue this? What are the limitations that should hold them back from even taking the leap?
Yeah, and this may sound a little bit self-serving as a consultant who does these kind of implementations, but I came into a client the other day. They're going through some M&A activity, and so they're getting ready for due diligence, and they vibe coded this really cool app, and they vibe coded it, and they were hosting their code on GitHub, and they were pushing it to Vercel for the web hosting, and they were excited to show me the app, and the app looked cool, and it pulled the right information and everything. And I said, well, let's look at your repository. We go over to GitHub. It was switched to a public repository, so anyone in the world could have come and found their code and got their data. I mean, I just, that's the kind of thing that just, it keeps me up at night, and also probably, keeps getting me work. But the truth is, I mean, like I said it before, with AI, I would be hard pressed. I think any of us would be hard pressed to find some digital process and not be able to automate it. But if I don't know, like I said before, cybersecurity or whatever, what am I exposing? I don't even know like the right questions to ask. And I think if mostly what I work with is mid-market, a lot of PE-backed teams, they don't have AI engineers. And I think DIY means you've got some sort of AI champions who are improvising with, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, doing their vibe coding. They're all on different models. None of them are sharing context. So you could, with a single prompt, have AI go build something that connected your ERP to your CRM and did something with the data, sent emails out for you and all that. It would go build that now. That's how powerful these agents have gotten. But if you're kind of rolling your own AI, that means building the harness around it yourself too. So you got to think about that verification, the approval gates, the audit trail, the security. And that's not a weekend project. I mean, yes, it might work, but you don't know. I mean, if you open up a wall of Python code and it looks like, Greek to you, then you don't even know what you're looking at. That is a black box to you because you're not a developer. And I think I know we hear about the SaaS apocalypse and Satya Nadella said, with generative AI, SaaS is dead. And I don't, whatever that saying is, that rumors of my death have been exaggerated, because if a SaaS company builds AI into the platform, they're going to already have all the security, the guardrails and everything in place. It's going to be tied. They've got the whole data schema and everything. They know where everything is. And I think that it's fundamentally different having the tool. And also, if you think about AI budgets and how much we're spending on everybody token maxing and blowing out the individual usage, I think that if you're getting the AI from the software provider, it's safer than pulling data into a cloud model. And you could be ripping everything down, you don't even know, to a Postgres database on your desktop or on some weird hosting site that you don't know what the security on that is. So for most clients I work with, it is, if we build something, it's going to happen in this environment, it's going to be safe, or let's see what's in your software already. And I think that you just have to think about what we can do and what we should. And if you can get the AI that's built in from a vendor that you already trust, that's actually kind of the responsible move here. It's when people are trying to fill in that gap. They say, well, my ERP does have AI, but it doesn't do this. And then it's just, and it's great and it's cool. And I think we're going to get there, but there's all those risks that we talked about before as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good context. And from what you're seeing with your clients right now, where has this actually been showing up in the day-to-day workflow of some of the finance teams that you're working with? Like, what are the biggest areas where they've been able to kind of take the leap?
Yeah, and it's the easiest one because, again, this is internal. The easiest one is always a variance analysis and pull in the trial balance, pull in the budget, do your vertical and horizontal analysis, all your ratios and your trends and everything. AI is really good at that. And you can have now an agent that, as soon as you close the month, it goes through and does all that for you, gives you the first pass. That's easy. We are doing some forecasting. I've one of my clients, I'm using AI to consolidate. They've got a bunch of different, it's actually QuickBooks Desktop they're on. They've got over a dozen QuickBooks Desktop entities. So the consolidation took them forever. And now basically with an ODBC, anyway, without getting in all the details of it, I click a button and all the units with intercompany and all that are consolidated. And I think that's the kind of thing that someone probably could vibe code that, but where are you sending that data? What are you doing with it? So there's, again, and I've got a million examples, and I know we don't have all day, but that is something. I mean, again, any sort of digital thing, or if there's, I think of swivel chair things of moving data from one system to another, or doing analysis, taking your pipeline data from your CRM and trying to do forecasting. You can you can forecast. I know there's all kinds of planning software out there too, but I'm old school. I'm going back to my days of forecasting where we did everything in Excel, and you could do some complicated forecasting, or you could do straight regression or whatever. But with AI, you could pull in all that data, have it run in Python instead of Excel, have it run some overly complex, all your seasonal forecast and everything. And you could have, like I said, like I mentioned earlier, doing Monte Carlo simulations on data, stuff that you never would have done historically. Those are some of the areas where we're using it.
Okay. And just to kind of finish it out with more of a cash specific lens, since that's what we focus on here at Agicap. Do you have an example that comes to mind of another client, or even just kind of your personal perspective as well on getting away from just using Excel, bringing in more of that automation into the day-to-day with AI?
Yeah, and there's a lot of promise here, and I think if you but there's also a lot of danger here. So on cash, I would say you have kind of the same two problems over and over, and it's visibility across a sprawl of banks. That same client I was talking about has 15 different bank accounts, but having visibility across all those banks and entities where nobody has a clean current picture, because if you're trying to do a cash forecast, you've got to go rip the data down from the bank, drop it into different systems, and you got forecasting that lives and dies in these spreadsheets, and that is just a time-consuming thing for them to cover, I think. And it's fine. It's a cash forecast is an internal document right up until you get to like that covenant conversation or a rating review, and then it's suddenly external, and now it's a real reported number. And if you're thinking about that with AI, well, you need to build and plan for that from the start. And I think my example that I went through, that's not an edge case. That is, think about how many people in the SMB and mid-cap space who are dealing with that exact same issue. So the choice that teams are facing right now is like, okay, I've got Excel, I've got Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever I'm using in Excel, and that's cool. Or I've got kind of this 20-year-old treasury system on the other. And until recently, there's kind of been nothing in between. And I think this is probably the perfect time to go back to you. And I really want to see how Agicap handles this. So I'll tell you what, I will stop sharing my screen, and I would love to see what you guys are doing.
Right on. Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts as I kind of go through with what you're seeing from your customers too, if any of this is resonating. But to summarize kind of where we see cash kind of getting more attention right now, if we go back to the use case, kind of like Glenn was mentioning, where information is spread out between all different teams, multiple Excel sheets, there are a lot of daily actions that are segmented, they're manual. And with AI, we're just able to contextualize a lot of that data, bring it together, help departments communicate a lot better. We work with teams that maybe are a true treasury function, a true treasury team of a large organization. Maybe it's a smaller organization where it's just the CFO or the controller that we're working with. They don't have a full-fledged treasury team, but they're kind of wearing multiple hats. They still need to put together views on cash to satisfy those covenant requirements, or like PE backing, like you said, your experience lies in, Glenn. Like that's a really common use case for us that we see with our customers, that they need that extra level of reporting. That's where if we can deploy AI to kind of do some of that analysis, like you mentioned earlier, with that human supervision, we can get a lot more done. So what do you need before you can kind of take the leap there? You need the data coming in from all of those different systems. So those examples that you highlighted earlier of different banks, different Excel sheets of external budgets, maybe your annual, your P&L, your accrual budget, expected AR and AP coming from your accounting tool or your ERP. Having everything in one place is just going to be able to allow teams to analyze the data more thoroughly and not have to kind of reach or message people cross-functionally to try to get context. So once you have that data, it's about using the platform to actually act across the entire scope of the cash management process, handling just visibility, but then also handling some other areas that we've extended into as well, like invoice management, managing debt payment schedules, investments, and then of course, forecasting. So where are we going? Where have we been as a business? For those that might be unfamiliar with Agicap, or this was their first exposure to Agicap coming on this call, we really started with cash positioning, short-term forecasting, midterm forecasting being the bread and butter of the platform. And we've extended it beyond that into a true end-to-end cash management solution. So helping with receivables, forecasting, DSO, assisting with three-way matching and the accounts payable process. And we're going from just getting the data to transforming the data, giving folks the ability to approve and execute payments, and then, of course, report on all of that. So AI is just the layer on top of what was already put in place to help accentuate and make this process even smoother. So when everything is under one roof, this kind of goes back to Glenn's point earlier. Like you were saying, Glenn, it's if you're starting a new chat every time, or if you're pulling data from different sources, how do you make sure you're sourcing all of it in the right repository, making sure that it's not public, like you said, like in that public GitHub example? How do you make sure that as you're kind of vibe coding something like this out yourself, you have proper guardrails in place to make sure that you're secure with all of this data? So as we build out the platform and kind of what our vision looks like moving forward, it really aligns with what folks are looking for, either building it themselves or in a product like Agicap in this new era. So we are the cash system of record for our customers, making sure we're bringing in data from not just their banks, but sorting it by entity, bringing in accounting data as well, helping the entire finance team orchestrate different tasks and then make those approvals on their own. And just being an assistant, a co-pilot that can provide suggestions, not necessarily operate, foot on the gas, no brakes whatsoever. Have some guardrails so that you can, like you said earlier, Glenn, maybe test out on some small use cases that have minimal consequences, and then continue to expand that over time as you see more. So,
hey, and Brandon,
go ahead.
If I could jump in, a question for you, because we're dealing with the exact. I think we're both like in that same spot with the clients that we're working with. As you go through and talk about everything that Agicap is going to cover, like when you go into a new customer, I'm guessing. I mean, I know there's a million different systems out there, but how much of this is just Excel and is just a massively time consuming, that's all happening completely offline, just within whatever spreadsheets they're doing, versus people who are, and I bet you're probably not running into a lot of people yet who've tried to do vibe coded apps or something to automate. Maybe they have something with AI that's pulling it down, but.
Yeah, definitely more and more as this has come up. I'd say just using Excel is probably 90% of the conversations where that's the manual workflow. And then out of those, maybe a quarter of those conversations have at least attempted or are wanting to explore what they can automate themselves, right? And same thing with non-finance tasks that I'm working on personally. Like how can we figure out where we can improve, what's worth delegating to someone else to figure out for us, right? And some of that just comes down to experimentation and then figuring out where your limitations are. So most of it comes from people having manual experience, just using Excel to build all of this and compile data together. But definitely seeing more and more people try to pull in different sources, automate as much as they can, if not already building it out, at least exploring the topic of how they could use an AI model to do it on their own.
Yeah, and I guess what's interesting to me as we go through all this, people trust Excel because you can save the file, you can go back to it, and you can, trace the formula and see all that. However, every time you rip something down to Excel and you get it out of the system, I think about the exposure of just fat fingering something or breaking a formula somewhere that, or the spreadsheet gets passed around, different people are working on it, something changes, and yeah, you've got an audit log, but you still the error rate once you come out of the system versus if you have those guardrails in the system. And I think that it just seems like that would be a huge advantage to, if you can do all this in the system where, talk about deterministic, where it's pulling from the exact table, nobody's going to fat finger any information. It's got exactly the information that's in there right now, and it's bringing out, oh, and then by the way, we're going to sprinkle some AI on top of it that is going to give you some more insights and all that, but you're kind of getting the best of both worlds there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, since we're coming up on time, got about 10 minutes left or so. if you have questions from either what I've just talked about in the last few minutes or all of what Glenn covered as well, please throw those in the chat and we'll get to those questions in just a couple minutes here. We'll just want to show the last couple of areas that we are advancing in terms of how we're putting AI on top of the platform that we've already built over the last decade. So this new smart report feature that we've rolled out recently, just using generative or plain text prompting, I should say, we will be able to generate a graph and determine the formatting. So just skipping ahead a little bit after we prompted, this will give you that view that you're thinking of in your head, just like we're all testing in our own AI environments. How can we visualize some of the data that we're trying to interpret already built in where the data source is here in Agicap, and we're inputting that prompt to be able to build the report coming off of that. So that's helping just visualizing the data. In terms of the MCP, and Glenn, you might have some thoughts here, given that this is more of a recent kind of hot topic for a lot of folks with all tools that they're using, not just on the finance side. But the MCP allows for a bidirectional connector. So the agent can see what's in Agicap, the cash data, the forecast that's already there. We can give an order to say, hey, how are things looking later this year, just in terms of our cash position? Or we could even say, hey, let's create a new scenario because I think our rent is going to go up by X%. I think that our sales are actually projected to be down next quarter by X%. Can we make a new cash scenario to see how that's going to impact my cash position? With this new MCP, you can just enter that in the AI model and it'll communicate with Agicap on the back end. So quick example using a Claude environment where we can build a dashboard, pulling all of the data and just show it as an artifact in Claude. This is where you'd be able to access the data lake, if you will, that's stored in Agicap, all the sources of information from the banks, from the accounting tool, and then just analyze and extract the data to be able to visualize it how you want here in Claude. But then same thing where you want to be able to add different tabs to dashboards. What happens if a customer pays late? We want to think about those scenarios. That's where we can create these new views and then, of course, validate and confirm the information rather than just giving it full-blown access to everything that you're making. So not only will this be helpful just in visualizing cash and what could happen, but also creating new scenarios that can go back into the Agicap platform to help make the work in our tool even easier. And last thing, just kind of on the same lens of using AI as an assistant, as a co-pilot of just asking questions. Our AI assistant in the platform can analyze based on your entity, based on your environment, like this example question, am I projected to stay within my cash flow budget in June? Compare that line by line, item by item, inflows and outflows. That's where we'll be able to project, like you see here, running through, no, you're not going to hit your budget. Here's why, here are the inflows, just to provide an answer to your plain text question, especially for folks that are not in the finance seat, giving them some visibility into the state of your cash by just kind of providing them with this simple reporting functionality to help them analyze. Really going to be helpful with folks that maybe are a smaller finance team or that just need to extend their visibility into their finances and their cash to maybe the CEO or somebody else from a different department that doesn't have the experience really digging into Excel sheets or digging into the forecast themselves. So those are just a couple of the ways that AI is being added on top of the platform. Key to point out, kind of like it was pointed out earlier by Glenn, all of the single sign-on, the role-based access control, already built into the platform. So when it comes to the security and how this is all managed, you can be assured that it's not the same risks as if you were just vibe coding it yourself. So with that, I want to turn it back over to some questions. I saw we've already gotten a couple come through. Before I answer those, Glenn, did you have any other clarifications that you wanted to make on like the MCP or anything else that I showed at the end there?
Yeah, I wish I had more time to talk about MCP, but I think in brief, what I would say on it is all three of the tools that you talked about, like there's a distinction here, and it's important to understand. I could take whatever data out of whatever system, rip it down, throw it up into Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, and do analysis on it. But again, it goes back to that context and what the model knows versus the tools that, and I'll get one answer, and it may be right, but it may be way off if the model interpreted it wrong. And the thing with whether it's your MCP server or the assistant that's built in or the reporting on it is, if the AI is embedded into the software, it has that semantic layer. It understands the data. You mentioned all the security and everything, but also the hallucination risk goes way down because it's universe. It lives in that world, and it's already been structured, and it knows where to pull certain information. Versus if you just dump a flat file CSV of 80,000 rows of data into a chatbot, good luck. Again, they're getting smarter. It might get it right, but we'll see how it evolves. But I think that there's going to be this interesting future where, the data is important, but the data architecture and understanding of it and how the model fits around that is going to be how we learn to trust the models more. And I guess that's just the last bit I wanted to add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one question that aligns with something that you brought up earlier of just like the tokenization changing, the costs changing as we scale AI further. Isabella asked, what are your thoughts as we move to more of this token economy and then them getting more expensive? What does that mean for future use? Should folks be worried that if they get too deep into these workflows, it's going to be too expensive later? Or what's your thought there?
Yeah, and really, token maxing and token use. It's 6 months ago, I would tell CFOs, stop complaining about ROI on AI. You're talking about a software expense that is, it would, depending on what platform you're on, 30 to 60 bucks per user per month. I'm eating my words on that now because as everybody's token maxing and these models are blowing through a lot more tokens, it's become much more of an issue. So as we move more towards this token economy, I think, there's already, this is like a win-win for the human team because there are already functions that take so many tokens that they're not going to replace a human. It's as much, if not more in some cases. I think customer service was one that everybody thought, oh, AI is going to take that over, but it's just as expensive to have AI run it as it is people in one recent report that I saw. So, here's what's weird. The token cost, and I know we're getting right at time, so I'll try to go quick, but token cost has actually dropped. The per token is like 10 times lower than it was 2 years ago, but the usage has blown up so much that we're spending more. I think that as the frontier labs and everybody battles it out, we're going to keep chipping away at the cost of these. And as the models get more efficient and we kind of figure it out. But in the interim, that's a whole other webinar, right? Is like trying to figure out how we're going to give our employees the tools, let them use it, be more productive, but instead of bonusing them on or encouraging them to use as many tokens as they can, actually measuring the output. So again, last couple of minutes, it's hard to go deep into it, but that is at the forefront and something that I'm talking to CFOs, companies of all sizes about these days.
Do you have an example from a client you've worked with recently of a use case that either completely changed their day-to-day, like just something that they really found success in from incorporating AI?
I'm working with a firm that is they do QOV type reporting, and they've pretty much obviously human in the loop and everything, but the amount of time it takes them to go through a QOV audit right now, they went through, because they started not with what can AI do? They started with, these are the processes that we're doing. How can we make AI do it? And it's been pretty amazing how much they've been able to cut the time down there on these tasks that are that we're taking, literally like days compressed down into minutes. And so they're and for all of us, that's for that firm more margin, but also means they can offer at a lower price things, so it's going to be real interesting to see long term what happens in the economy as this does actually get to some measurable productivity gain and the understanding that people can move so much quicker with AI. So,
yeah. And one concern that I hear a lot is that people want to investigate just how their data is stored internally. Like how much do they need to clean up their data before giving an AI tool access to it? Kind of a chicken and the egg problem. But how do you suggest that to your clients?
Yeah, that's really tough because, again, clients are dealing with who's the data if you're in the SMB space, good luck on who your data, depending on what industry you're in. But even as you get larger, it is the concern that, yeah, okay, this is all internal data, but that doesn't mean we want everybody in the company to have it. So it's a battle when you're not a data expert and you're trying to determine what AI has access to and what that means the rest of the company and the rest of the team has access to.
Cool. Well, really appreciate your insights, Glenn. Any last words for the folks? Just where can they find you? Some other exciting things you might be working on?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm at RoboCFO.ai. I've got a blog there. I've got a Substack. I think a lot of the people here might be from my Substack as well. It's called Deep Finance Dispatch. Write about this stuff every week, and yeah, really excited working with you guys, and looking forward to going. And as we were talking about the webinar, I've got several clients I think that are in dire need of Agicap's product here. So I'm excited to continue the relationship as well.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for the time, Glenn. Really appreciate your insights and just the experience from what you've been building out with your clients. And for all those that attended, thanks for carving out the time. We're available for any follow-up questions. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or just email brandon.barnes@agicap.com. But thanks so much, everyone, for stopping by. I hope you have a good rest of the week. And to whomever you are rooting for this weekend, hopefully they come out victorious. See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.